everyone, it's Richard here at the Hairy Tarantula, and I'm joined today by Ryan. And today we are going to talk to you about a brand new release. It's coming out on April 18th. So let's get started. Hey Ryan, how's it going?
I'm good, Richard. How are you?
I am fantastic. This is Allies and Adversaries, and this book is a source book that you as a GM will want for a very long time.
Oh yeah. This is also one of those books I think that as a player, this is sort of a love letter to the original trilogy era. This is all of those characters from that. You have Vader, Luke, Leia, you get Akbar, you get Jabba, you get Boba, you get all these really cool characters. And a lot of these characters have been statted previously in other books. A great example is the book Dawn of Rebellion. This book has information about the Star Wars Rebel television show, but also has a lot of characters like Vader, like Thrawn, that have come out, and they are important to the story. So we do get those characters in Allies and Adversaries. But the fun part is, now we're getting new characters who have never been statted before, like Palpatine, Yoda, like the two major ones there. And having glanced at this book, they've got some really scary stats. So
Yes, so you and I had this conversation about a little while ago about what Palpatine's force rating was, and it was an 8.
yeah,
So there's a spoiler alert for you. It's an 8.
Yoda's actually on par with him too at an 8. And they've got like stat blocks that are crazy, like 2 pages long worth of stats. Like, it's pretty expansive.
Yeah. So besides obviously our favorite characters, there's a bunch of new characters that got introduced as well. We have, of course, classic trilogy ones like Tusken Raiders, Jawas, and Ewoks. But there was also a new one as well who is based off of concept art from the original trilogy, and that is...
Those are the Lasats. So, any of you who have ever watched Star Wars Rebel will know the character Zeb. Zeb was a Lasat. They were a species who were pretty much eradicated by the Empire. There were a few of them left. But what a lot of people didn't know was there was actually a planet hidden off with more of them. So now the galaxy's starting to get reacclimated with them. There's more of them in. So now we're getting to see those the species. If you've ever looked up, it's Ralph McQuarrie. They were the original concept up for Wookiees. And they look purple and have this sort of... They're humanoid. They are pretty big and bulky, similar to Wookiees, but rather than being full fur, there's a mixture of like leathery skin and fur. Again, if you look up the image of Zeb, you'll kind of get a feel. They all look very similar to that sort of design. And as Richard explained, so for those of you who know Jawas, Tusken Raiders, and Ewoks from the original trilogy of movies, they are now statted out for players to make playable characters. Each of them have their own unique stats, and it's very interesting.
So as a GM who's run this game, I am very excited to actually try this again with a group of Ewoks versus the Empire. And the reason why is, you know, I grew up in the 80s, and Ewoks were just kind of like, oh my god, they're so cute and cuddly.
They're adorable.
And then you realize when you're an adult what Ewoks were actually doing in the third film, trying to eat people.
Yep.
So they were cannibalistic in some way. Not like, well, I guess they're not really cannibals amongst themselves.
They're murderous monsters.
they're murderous little monsters, yes.
And I love the fact that, like, Disney and Star Wars themselves have acknowledged this. Like, they've made comics. Battlefront 2, the game, has the game mode where the Ewoks are hunting stormtroopers.
Yeah.
You know, the people with advanced weaponry.
Like, if you watch Return of the Jedi, and if you've never seen Return of the Jedi, shame on you.
Go watch it.
Go watch it. The Ewoks drumming on the helmets and that, and the large bonfires behind
Yeah.
it. It's like, what happened to these people? Were they just barbecued?
Probably. I mean, they actually did a short with... there was a short that Disney did that was, I think... I want to say Adventures of the Galaxy. It was just a short animated series of like just sort of like independent stories. And one of them is Han and Leia trying to help a tied up stormtrooper from getting eaten by giving Ewoks rations. Like, yeah, Ewoks are scary.
Ewoks are scary. And there's a lot of other scary monsters in this book as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's just take a quick look. We saw the Wampa.
There's the Wampa in there.
We saw IG-88.
IG-88, the robot bounty hunter.
Bounty hunter, yes. Killer robot. There's 4 of them.
There are 4 of them, and they tried to take over the Death Star, and that was great.
That was definitely great. So, 2 things.
Yep.
Our producers already told us that IG-88 did in fact upload his consciousness to the Death Star. It just so happened that the Death Star blew up, so whatever, dude.
Yeah.
You screwed up there. And Rancor is, in fact, in this book, along with Aronto, Arik, mouse droids,
And one that I'm excited about is the Sarlacc Pit. That's actually super interesting to see. Like, I know some of these have been in other books, but having them in one nice, neat collection is fantastic.
And that's true. Like, this is completely like an offshoot from a lot of other systems that Fantasy Flight has always collected. Is in their books they separate things out.
Yeah.
Like, there's not really a collection in most of their role-playing games.
No.
It's, you have to have this book, this book, this book. Just kind of give a broad view of what's going on.
Yeah.
Like Dawn of the Rebellion is a perfect example. And this is how classically they would produce their book. So you'd flip it open and you'd be like, okay, cool, here's a couple species. And,
it's usually divided up between, like, oh, here's some story elements and
Yeah.
some GM stuff. Here are some new weapons. Here are some new
Gear,
adversaries, nemesis, all of that sort of stuff. And it's all divided out pretty well. Like, it's all evenly spaced.
Yeah.
And it's never like... This one is very specifically related to Star Wars Rebels. So it's sort of that very tight time frame.
Yeah, it's very niche in that you're only looking at like a 4-year period.
Yeah.
If that, I think actually no, my mistake. It's a 3-year period in
Yeah.
that frame. But that's exactly the thing. They spread it out.
Yeah.
It's never in a neat little pile.
Oh, yeah.
Where this goes against the grain.
Oh, yeah.
This is a collected volume of major NPCs, minor characters, minor NPCs, adversaries, everything that you want as a GM and as a player to experience in the Star Wars universe.
Oh, yeah.
If anything, this is probably, I think, the biggest leap and bound I've seen Fantasy Flight do in regards for a book.
Yeah.
It's a collected bestiary.
Yep.
And
I'm super excited too. And I'm a player. I play at the store when I get a chance. I love what we do with it. But the fun thing about this to me is I'm getting to look at all these characters. There are some characters like Rebels isn't in this, and I think that's because they have the Dawn of the Rebellion book, so they're not including them. Mm-hmm. But you do get to see like Rogue One era characters like Krennic and Urso. You get in, and then you go straight from I think it's Rogue One up until Episode 6 essentially. Yeah. That's that time frame. And to me, it's like, oh, I get to. Like, we get to develop with it. It's not like when we role playing this game, it's like we're very kind of centered in a very small area. We actually develop as the story develops. So having this kind of a book is fantastic for me as a player and for a GM because it's like, oh, we're evolving as the story has progressed.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like, the system has been specifically designed where you take on the roles of minor characters, part of the rebellion or part of the Empire, or somewhere in between, and you play your own adventure as a backdrop to what's really going on politically, like in the climate, and also like militarily, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, sometimes a player wants to run across like oh my God, I just met Princess Leia.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, but if I ever met Space Mama, rest in peace. In a game, I think that would be something very memorable.
Indeed.
And that's a story that you tell other gamers, etc. And this is what's great about a book like this.
Yeah.
Is it gives you stats, it gives you those, it gives you an outlook at how these characters are.
Yeah, and I think too it's important that, like we said, there's Palpatine, right? Like all those really important characters. That's like something really massive in nostalgia for a lot of people. Like, and part of it too is I think it's great for GMs where you can now sit down and go, well, these characters are doing really well. I want to throw a wrench into their plan.
Yeah.
And when you think about, like, oh, what can I do? And it's kind of hard sometimes to find out really good plots, especially when there is still a set story, everything goes around. But when you can slide Vader in to go, we're going to make this really difficult. It's going to make a huge impact on you. This will change a story.
And
that's fun.
And that's true. Like, if you look at characters like Vader, who, was the Emperor's enforcer through his entire reign.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, cool. This is how we're gonna roll with this. Vader wasn't always beside the Emperor.
No.
Vader had his own agenda. Vader, patrolled with the 501st, etc. And, he went and did missions.
Yeah.
like, sure, it was probably in part of the Emperor, but it's also part of the Empire as well.
Yeah.
Vader understood that, there was the sacrifice he made to be part of the dark side of Sith Lord was, sometimes you got to go out and do something really crappy, but your end game is you're positioning yourself for power and control.
Yeah.
So, with a book like a Bestiary, where you can stat these characters out properly now, and they're not like run of the mill homebrews.
Yeah.
You can sit there and just play it out, and I think that's what makes this book definitely a definite buy for me, and I'm looking forward to reading through the rest of it for sure.
I glanced through and looked at a lot of it. It's super interesting. The one thing, because they did mention, when you get a character like Vader or Palpatine or someone who's so scary that in the lore, you kind of need to make sure they don't get overpowered by a group of like 6 players, because no matter how strong you could be, that's still really hard to fight, right?
And exactly, and this is where other games like D&D have the power. There's a power structure.
Yeah.
It's like I have 6 player characters. I have to throw something that will give them a challenge where they're not going to just be they're just going to overrun it.
Yeah.
And other games is the same thing. There's always a power rating system.
Yeah.
And when you have the balance between a good NPC villain or major character versus your players, it's always beneficial for everyone.
Well, I like the fact that with this, even though it has very strict stats written out, it does specify, change it up to suit the needs of your story. Because again, you might be fighting Boba Fett, and maybe your characters can all fly, so you want to change up how he can do things so that it's not just sort of a run-of-the-mill fight. You really get that chance to customize and explore these kind of characters in a way that really makes it fun.
And I think you set that up perfectly. So, if you are a player or a GM and you're looking for a brand new source book for all of the Star Wars role-playing games, because this one covers it all, then come on out, pick up Allies and Adversaries. You can pick it up at harryt.com or pick it up in store at 3456 Yonge Street here in Toronto. Until next time, see you soon.